There are handouts over there for you to look at for other programs. On this table and scattered around, I printed off about 50 copies of different self-assessment things and assessment things that teachers, there are thousands, tens of thousands of these available on the internet of people assessing teachers so that they teach better. And a lot of it is for certification, a lot of it is K-12. There are all kinds of questions and things that people look for. It's actually overwhelming and a little bit intimidating to just go out there and say, oh, I'm going to find something that works, and I'll just start looking at myself with this. I'm sure that there's some good information in some of these, and you're welcome to take them all because we're not going to reuse those. But they're all online, and maybe they'll get us started on some thoughts on what is useful when we start to look at our own classroom teaching. But to start off, I'd like to, let's go around the room and say, hey, my name is John, and I'm interested in this element of what video self-assessment, or using video to make my teaching better, or using video to see what's happening in my classroom and see what are the ways that I can facilitate the student learning in a way better than what I'm doing right now or than what's happening right now. Remembering that teaching and learning is a two-person thing or multi-person thing, right? It's not just the instructor delivering the content, but it's also the students bringing forward what is interesting to me, how can I apply this to my life, things like that. So why are we here? Wendy, any thoughts since you're conveniently
at the corner to start? So I'm Lindy, I'm from chemistry, and I actually am trying to convince the teachers, the instructors, and faculty that I support to do this very thing. So I'm kind of coming at it from a meta standpoint, I guess. And I would also like to create some videos that we can use for training purposes to kind of dissect what active teaching looks and feels like. So kind of coming at it from a different angle, I think. So.
Yeah, because if they can see things that are happening elsewhere, they might say, well, how do I get from where I'm at to that point?
Right. We do onboarding and we talk about, this is what this looks like, but in terms of, a lot of them can't really envision what it's going to look and feel like, and so I think seeing some videos would be helpful.
Very good. All right.
I'm Heidi with the program in ESL, and I'm wondering if peer feedback can be a component of recording yourself teach, and how that can be done in a supportive, non-threatening way.
Yeah, making it safe because it's scary. Scott.
Hi everyone, I'm Scott Ovchadek, and I'm here to support all of you to figure out how to do this while maintaining student privacy and getting around FERPA. Getting around is my word, not the registrar's word. But here to help support any way I can to make sure that we maintain student privacy and allow you to use this valuable way to assess what you're doing and improve.
All right, Sue.
So I'm Shoemaker from the physical therapy program, and I've worked with John in the past on the feedback on teaching through the Teaching Academy. And so I volunteered to be videotaped today to look at a specific thing for myself, just for introduction to students, which Jennifer is one of our students. So I kind of tend to jump into things myself. And so kind of looking at it from being self-assessed and also part of the feedback on teaching experience to see how that can all kind of intersect with each other. And to Scott's point, we ran into that very issue in videotape in our class. So that was a discussion point.
Hi, I'm Kari Jordan. I'm going to do at AT. I have kind of two interests here. I work supporting instructors putting content online. We usually have our fabulous video crew that can actually do video of them, but I'm interested in just hearing tips and ideas for self-recording. If I am working with an instructor that cannot, doesn't have any funding for our services. And the other thing, I'm just interested in what instructors are looking at finding out, because I'm also working in the learning analytics realm where we're trying to think of different ways that we help instructors conduct their teaching and their students.
Carolyn?
I'm Carolyn Daughtry-Crow, and I'm an instructional designer here in Dewitt Academic Technology. And I think just to kind of echo what Kari said, and also some of the things that Lindy brought up too, is thinking of how to do it, why to do it, and in multiple ways that it could be used. If it's for both self, for being examples, if there's things for the students, like be able to use it in different levels.
I am Adiola. So I'm from African Cultural Studies. I coordinate the African Languages program with the department. And why I'm here is to see the possibility of using this video to kind of give the instructional staff some feedback about their teaching and see if there could also be possibility of more peer feedback and see how we can improve learning in the classroom.
Yeah. And yeah, moving from the self to the peer, that was one of my first thoughts is, can we start with the self, have it on something that's simple and easy and private and nobody sees it but me, and then, all right, this isn't so bad, I'll show it to a trusted colleague, move it on to there. Katarina?
I'm Catalina Toma. I'm a professor in communication arts. I have videotaped myself a lot, an entire semester, actually, one of my classes. The purpose of that was actually so I could convert my class into an online class. Then I learned that this is not how you do online classes. I learned that online classes are kind of conducive to short videos of explaining a key, maybe tricky concepts, and I've had to produce quite a few of those. So I'm interested in the production of these short videos in an online course content. That's one thing. And the other is I have also taught public speaking in my day and numerous classes where I assign presentations, and I have encouraged students to videotape themselves while delivering these presentations. And especially now that I teach a course online, I'm doing that a lot. So I'd like to explore some of the learning opportunities for students and them watching themselves, and also making these videos publicly available kind of to the entire class. So I have 150 students in my class. So I think there's some unique dynamics in kind of creating an artifact of yourself that will be viewed by 150 of your peers. So I'd like to explore that a little bit more.
I'm Don Fleshman, and I am a part of academic technology as well. I coordinate the video service inside of academic technology, and I think my role here today is maybe to answer some real big picture questions about, like, what's possible with the actual recording of these videos, what are the technologies or considerations that you should have to make sure you get something that's useful for you. So.
All right. I write that down, but I'd also want to point out that on the activity sheet here, we've got several questions to help get you started in thinking about what kinds of things you might want to do, how to do it, and so on and so forth. We've got too many handouts today, I'm sorry. It's just too much paper all over the place.
Hey, John,
Yes.
got one of those?
Oh, I suppose. I should also say that we have a Canvas course, and at the top of your activity sheet are instructions to get to the Canvas course, to self-enroll. It's a sandbox course, so it's not associated with the registrar's office really. And the nice thing about this is there's a link to a live digital version of the activity sheet here. And at the bottom of the activity sheet, which has more information, but there's opportunities for you to add your own notes and things on the bottom. So if you have any thoughts or questions or want to start with any of these things or any of these things, we can just start talking. What's the text? Down there. So let's start off with The why do it, and maybe is it valuable? And I guess, Kevin, you've done, I think, maybe the most of anyone that I'm aware of here so far, and you've done it a while ago.
Yeah.
Are there any long-term effects? Did you learn anything, or was it a waste of your time? So that was several years ago.
No, it wasn't a waste of my time. It was really hard. It was very difficult psychologically to do. It's the same reason why I never watch myself when I'm giving an interview on TV or listen to myself on the radio. For me, it's extremely hard, but you get a glass of wine and watch yourself. It gets nicer. So you observe a lot of things like pacing. And I think I'm better at pacing now and being kind of cognizant of students' note-taking abilities of what I'm saying. Jumping around in tangents and little side stories that you want to tell and the extent to which they fit in with the narrative or not. You get to observe kind of the match between your PowerPoint slides, if you have any, and your verbal presentation. Are the slides sufficient? Do they need more information? Are you covering everything you're trying to cover? You can get a sense somewhat of student kind of influx in this space, who's late, who's not late, who's leaving early, who's not. And there's some attention checks, but my class is so large that it's kind of difficult to do anything about it. There's always going to be, 10, 15% of students who are online shopping and stuff like that. And you get to see a little bit of that, so that's not pleasant.
When you did it for the semester, did you have so when you're in a lecture hall, you've got 150, 200,
150, yeah.
150 students. Did you set the camera in the back?
No, I'm actually really lucky in that I teach in a special room that has all sorts of tech embedded in it. It's actually a projection room. They show movies in it.
Okay.
So there was somebody, I had tech support, there's somebody at the Instructional Media Center in my building who came and started this machine in the back room that I couldn't see.
Okay.
And then just emailed me the file. So that was pretty nice.
So it was nice because you didn't actually even notice or sometimes
No.
remember that it was happening.
No. It was definitely not a case of me having to bring in a tripod or set stuff up. I think that's a pretty big barrier.
Yeah. What other situations would we have for watching, for setting up a camera in our classrooms? What other types of classroom issues would we have as far as that? So
we videotaped ours in a collaborative classroom, so we didn't have this technology, but in our program, the School of Medicine has set up, again, the video thing. So actually every course is videotaped if we want it already. However, the angle of it is not on the students, so you hear their voices, you can see the instructor if you don't move around too much and get out of view. So that's already implemented, so you could change the view of the camera, but then you're changing your intent, and that's where I think, you need a little bit more into FERPA and stuff. But it's just part of that world, so it's already existent.
Could you have, if FERPA allows you to take your students, could you have two cameras, one on you and one on the students, and then you could watch both streams and see what's going on as a comparison?
With my limited knowledge, I don't think so, but I could be wrong, because it seems like the camera angles are either on the students or they're on the instructor in the PowerPoint.
With two cameras.
Oh, two,
Yeah,
you have to set up another one. Yeah, you just have to set up another
So let's
extra
talk
one.
about that and call on Scott to give us some thoughts on the policies on.
So the good news, so you do have the capability or opportunity to tape or record yourself. And that's just fine. What I think is where the line in the sand begins is that it is not considered an educational record unless a student is identifiable in the actual recording. So if we use the use case that we were sharing earlier, where you're taping just yourself and you're not seeing the students, you're not saying students' names. You may hear student questions, and that gets in a little bit of a gray area, but I would offer in a large classroom, you wouldn't know who that student asking the question is. Then it's for all intents and purposes, anonymous. So it's not a student record. The good news is that in an anonymous space, so you could share that with anyone. You could keep it for yourself. You could share that publicly if you'd like to do that. You could share it with your colleagues in the department or such. So that's one piece. Now, if we flip it and say, okay, now there were student identifiable information, then those become an educational record, which is still okay. You can still have as an instructor, you are a university official. You have an educational need to know. I could offer that this is improving instruction, and so it would be okay for you to use it. The line in the sand when it is an educational record, though, is who you can share that with. You can only share that information with another educational, another university official with an educational need to know. I could offer that if you're sharing this in a department and you're using it to improve instruction or to help a colleague improve instruction within your department as UW-Madison, that's an educational need to know. That's university official, we're good to go. You can't post it on Facebook, obviously, but I have to say it. You can't share it in your personal, professional. So say, like myself, I do many professional presentations. If it's a student educational record, you can't show that as part of your presentation or part of your discussion there. And so really if there's no student identifiable, it's not an educational record. If it is student identifiable, then it is an educational record, but you all have educational need to know. Now, for some reason, let's take that third step. If for some reason it is an educational record, because students are identified, and you do have a really good reason that you would want to show this to an audience outside of the institution, then what you need to do is get student consent. And that would have to be a written consent from those students that are identifiable that says that what your intent, what the purpose of the use is, how long you plan to use it, etc. What I will say is that in that the student has full right to decline it being a student record or being shared with anyone outside of the institution or outside with anyone with an educational need to know. You can't negatively or punitively downgrade them or grade them negatively. So they do have that right. And so you would either have to edit or cut that portion out of your video to show it or get that consent from the student. So it's really I see it as three big buckets. Anonymous, it's not an educational record. When it is an educational record, you can use it with university officials at UW-Madison that have an educational need to know. And then if it is identifiable and you want to take that outside of and sharing that with folks that are not, that do not have an institutional educational need to know, then you must get student consent. And then there's all the clauses that say you can't force a student into consent, etc.
So I could share a video that's an educational record outside of my department or outside of my school, as long as it's in university.
I think that's where it's a little bit gray, and I want to hear what the purpose of that was.
Okay.
Is it if we're here in a setting like this, I could offer that we're sharing, but we would disclose that these are educational records, but everyone here has an educational need to know to improve instruction. For some of our folks that are not in the classroom, I think their support roles would warrant them possibly having access and being able to see that. I prefer it to be in the department you're in or in a collaborative, because then it's very simply put, you're improving instruction of that department and the curriculum and the program, etc.
So for
Great
example,
questions.
we're looking at taking this idea and saying, hey, UW-Madison instructors, it's easy to self-assess yourself. And we start off with you can do it your own, no worries, no problems, don't share it with anyone. You can share it with a trusted peer in the department or another educator at UW-Madison.
Yeah, the two keywords there are university official with educational need to know.
University official, educational need to know. And then anything, and that's not just like one, but we could have a session here if we were like, hey, let's look at Sue's classroom and help her figure out getting to this, moving from the self to the peers. Let's look at the classroom activity. You look at peer-to-peers, interaction, you look at it, instructor to peer interaction, you look at the fidgeting, you look at and we could have that sort of a session without it. As long as we don't videotape it, we send it out, do that on Facebook. Good.
University official, that can be adjuncts that are hired to teach, is that, that's okay?
Yep, they have an educational need to know,
Okay,
and they're improving instruction.
yeah, because with our active classrooms, it's gonna be very hard to make videos that don't have student faces and
Yep.
that information.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the, and I'd love to hear more about the use case that you all experienced either this semester or in the past, because the other way to, I don't want to say get around it, but the other support tool, trick that you all can use is to be upfront and clear with the students by putting it in the syllabus. That as part of your assessment, I'm going to be recording that creates it as an educational record, and our office can help you draft that language to just boilerplate it into your syllabus. But being upfront and transparent with the student and letting students know if they have a concern with that to come see you. And 99.9% are going to not have a problem with it. And those that do, then we'll have to have a conversation about how either we make sure that they're not on camera or something else.
Right.
But being able to put it in your syllabus, then you're being clear at the expectations that you have as an instructor, and that's your faculty rights. And it also is a way for students to understand and know what they're getting into before they begin attending the class and participating.
Something I'm thinking about right now is, it looks like chemistry 104 for the spring semester is going to have 5 out of 6 instructors new. And so the onboarding process will be pretty rigorous.
Yep.
So I'm considering or wondering about how we can capture what the instructors are doing this semester.
Yep.
And so if we are using it just here and we talk to, we probably would, and again, I have to get the faculty that are teaching now to agree to this,
Yep.
but video them, because they're doing some really great things.
Sure.
Video them.
Yeah.
And so that would, we can't put it in the syllabus. It would be kind of like a real time, hey, this is coming up in the next class or whatever.
Yeah, I think there's a variety of options that we could pursue, but I think the other piece that I'm hearing from you is that your intent and purpose is to keep this in the department
Oh,
to
yeah.
improve instruction,
Absolutely.
which you as faculty are educational, or university officials with an educational need to know. You have access to student records. You can use these student records. It's when you start to expand that to any other populations that's when you have to be, you may need consent.
Okay.
But if you're keeping it internal, I would offer that it's good to be transparent. I'm not trying to do anything nefarious here or anything, but you don't even have to inform them because we have other FERPA language that lets people know that educational records are used to improve instruction. They're used by educational or university officials for education.
Thank you.
Yeah, no worries. It's great stuff.
And that's sort of an interesting, I love the idea of putting it in the syllabus because, and that gets to your next thing of where you want the students to, and we've had in the past, students videotape themselves, giving presentations, they look at that, they see great benefits in doing that, right? So it also is obvious then if instructors do it, they can see benefits if they know what to look for. Are there similarities in the rubrics or checklists that students would look through on their own versus what you would look through when, or what you looked at when you were doing it for yourself? I imagine pacing, for example, if I'm giving a presentation as a student or if I'm talking to the class as a lecturer, pacing is important. Staying aligned with what's on the screen at the moment, making sure that my outcomes or objectives are covered clearly. Like, I imagine there's a lot of similarities there.
Do you mean the course evaluation rubric at the end?
No, not the course evaluation rubric, but just the, you talked about having students videotape themselves and share with each other.
Oh, no, they don't share with each other. It's just
Okay.
for their own self.
You said something about sharing with 150 other people.
Well,
Was
that's
that
the
you?
stuff they put online,
Okay.
but they don't grade each other.
Okay, yeah, I'm sorry, not for grading, but
Yeah.
yeah. And I've had that in class that I've taught where they give presentations and then they grade each other's presentations, and we had online versions of that, or videotaped versions of that as well.
Oh, that's an interesting assessment scenario. I haven't used it, but it sounds interesting.
And that'd be something you could do in Kaltura or even Blackboard Collaborate now in Canvas, in groups, and then give them a rubric to practice among each other and such.
So the PT students do to learn how to provide a history, an examination history. They are videotaped, and then they self-assess themselves using the same rubric that their peer does to assess them, and then the faculty also assess them with the same rubric. So they're all the same rubrics, but just from a different lens. And then the standardized patient also uses the same rubric, so it's kind of like a 360 thing. And that's been, Jennifer, I look to you. Was that beneficial? I
Yeah,
don't
it
know.
was. I think having the same rubric for all of the viewers helps you see maybe where your own perceptions are interfering with what you're seeing, or maybe something's not as bad as you thought it was. It just makes it a little easier to like be consistent across the different views.
And I imagine having even going back to your own self-assessment of your own teaching or what's happening in the classroom, if you did put it in very upfront with your students, put it in and said, hey students, we're gonna do this semester because I want to become a better teacher. I imagine that they'd be like, awesome. And they would not have a problem with having the camera facing them. And then the other thing is, if you do it every day, and it's easier than you just put this up on the chalkboard here and now I'm videotaping you. You might notice this the first day. The second day, you just think that that's where I'm storing my camera.
So I have a question for you, Scott.
Sure.
So what if you put this in the syllabus, and that is your sincere intent, is just to use it for your own teaching, and then all of a sudden you get involved in something else down the road, and you're like, oh, I have these videos. I think this would really be applicable to this situation, which I had no idea existed 2 years ago.
Yep.
Can I use that old video?
If it is an educational record.
Yeah,
and so
given
your
it's an
student-
educational record.
Your
Yeah.
student identifier, you would need to get consent.
Sent then,
to share.
okay. Good to know.
It would be the same as if you had a paper.
Mm.
You would have to anonymize that paper to share a paper with another colleague because of the great work and the scholarship that the student showed. You would have to do that, because I'm sure none of you share papers that your students have done with anyone outside of the institution.
Not without anonymizing them. of
Yes,
course.
without anonymizing them or having full consent, because that would never happen at UW-Madison. But yeah, it would be the same.
Okay, thank you.
So let's talk about a little
That's
bit.
sorry, John. That's one of the, I think, key benefits of putting it in the syllabus, though, is then that gives you, while you're being authentic for what you're trying to do in the purpose, you do have that consent that would be able to share something good. You could word that in the syllabus, so then you're protected to not have to track down those
Back down.
students. That would be a
But can students just opt out of terms in the syllabus? I mean, just because it's in the syllabus doesn't mean that all of them have to agree to it once they take your course.
Yeah, so that's a great question. So we've run into that a lot with faculty that have wanted to use social media quite a bit, and students are very reluctant to put information into social media. There's a couple ways to handle it. I always like to approach it first from once they see that and they understand what your intent is, let's have a conversation about what their concerns are so that we fully understand them. And then it is ultimately up to you and the student. The student can choose not to take the course or take it with a different
Yeah, but it
instructor.
still feels coercive. Like if you as an instructor put that in the syllabus and they need to take the course because it's required
required,
and whatnot,
yep.
will they actually speak up and
That's a
voice
question. Yep.
concerns? I mean, that's maybe an ethical issue more than a legal issue.
It's more of an ethical issue. And you don't, I always start it from a conversation to see what the intent is, and is there an agreement that could be worked out where you're still honoring what you're trying to do in the class and maintaining that student privacy. And most of the time that can be negotiated that we've been involved with. We've only had a very few where we have told the student, I'm sorry, and to find a different requirement because this is how the faculty member wants to teach that class.
This reminds me of when I was in grad school, a bunch of my professors were assigning public blog posts for their classes. And nobody thought of opting out or saying anything about it, but in retrospect, that's just not something that I would ever do because it just doesn't seem fair to the students. Isn't they're toying with ideas or learning, they may be saying dumb things and that's okay for a class, but to make that recordable onto eternity by posting it on a blog, that seems pretty problematic. But you're saying if I still wanted to do that, all I'd have to do is just put it in the syllabus.
Well, the anonymization is another way to do that. I've done that as well, and I said up front, you can put whatever username you want, so you can be totally anonymous as long as I know, what your username is, so I can do the assessment of it. I felt like that was a fine thing to do, and part of that, the beautiful thing about that sort of a public expression of this is what I'm learning, is that the quality goes up and they learn to write and to speak in public. So they're a little bit more careful, and we talk about you need to be a little bit more careful because of this audience than you would if it were just in between you and I.
Yeah, it's always fun when you're on camera for these kinds of discussions being taped.
There's that in here, yeah.
Which we are, yeah, I know. We've had situations where we've had faculty members that run class and they've had everything, all of the student records, papers, exams, quizzes have been online, blogs. And we've had to go to the dean, the associate dean of academic affairs and have a conversation because students have voiced it anonymously through different avenues about concerns. And we have to address those or take the site down or work with the faculty member to take the site down. So I think my advice in those situations is let's have a conversation. Let's try to talk with the students to understand what their concerns are. And then let's figure out a way that you can accomplish what you're trying to accomplish in your classroom, as well as maintaining that privacy. And whether that be anonymity, whether that be some other way, let's talk that through.
So in Google, I think you were telling me this the other day, I believe that there is a way to do the easy face scrubbing, maybe you know this as well, where you can it's very easy now, I've heard, to put a blur on somebody's face.
Yeah, when you're editing your video in YouTube, you can blur out faces now.
So it's a little bit extra work to do that level of anonymization, but it's not, it doesn't require the high-end software that it required even a few years ago to do that. So that's kind of a nice.
It would be the face, and then if any names are shared, you'd have to scramble that name when it's sent.
What about voices?
Voices
The
are
gray
tricky.
area.
Yeah, that's a gray area because if you have a class of 100 or so, nobody's going to know the voice. I would offer. Anyone with reasonable knowledge would not know the voice. If you're doing your due diligence to scramble the face, scramble the name, I'm thinking you're okay. That's a low. I would say there's risk there, but we would accept that low level of risk.
So class size is a factor then too.
Yeah, I think so. Yes, that would be my choice.
And the fidelity of the video camera. So one of the things that's kind of nice, accidentally nice about this format is because we're streaming through Google, the compression is terrible. So we could have all kinds of names and things up here, but they're totally not visible. We've tested this several times with and that's, the good news is, as long as we don't mention names, we're probably good. The bad news is the people at home trying to see what's written on the screen and other slides, they can't see that either. So there are trade-offs with that. But again, the anonymization is only if you need to go out into the world beyond a educational official at UW-Madison.
Along those lines of that third bucket, do you think if it was something like the Teaching and Learning Symposium that's hosted here on campus, that's more of the public?
I would be very concerned. Not very concerned. I would be concerned about that. I would fall that into the third bucket.
Good. Okay, good to know.
We are working, this has spurred a lot of discussion in our office, so we're going to be working on a brief specific FAQ that we'll put together that's associated all with videotaping your classroom and yourself. So we can take that, the RO will take that as an action item from this, or I will. Well, actually, I won't, but. I'll make sure somebody does.
All right, so the registrar's office is on that. Excellent. So what are the things, are there technical considerations, Don, that you have heard that you might, from what we're talking about today, does anything come to mind? Thoughts on advice and such?
I mean, my advice is if you are going to record yourself for self-assessment, you need to pick the one thing that you want to record for. Don't assume that you can set the camera up everywhere and get if you want to assess just your teaching, like your pacing or your body language or your gaze, set up for that. If you want to get the classroom, set up for that, and just be real intentional, because that's going to have some impacts on what you do. Like you said, set your phone on the shelf there, but
Yeah.
like today, you can imagine if you're in a classroom this size, if you set this in the back because you want to get yourself, this student wasn't here when you set it here.
Right.
Now all of a sudden, like, you're getting nothing for that whole day. So just taking that into consideration. And you talked about, you can get at this, and I know this from working with the folks out at SMPH, you can get out of the range of where the camera is. So you need to know, like, what's the capturable range of whatever I'm using. So, I mean, that's my one piece of advice is record for a single piece of assessment, not try to imagine that I can get every student's interaction, or if I want to get how students are interacting with one another or with myself, shoot for that, or position the camera in a place where you get that. If I'm trying to do it just for me, then do that.
Which that aligns well with probably your objectives of being videotaped, correct?
Right. Well, that's what
Yeah.
we should do nothing in the classroom that doesn't have an objective. I
Right.
mean,
Right.
we have objectives for what we're going to teach. I mean, everything has some intentionality.
Yeah.
So that's an abstract. It's not really a tech thing, but it affects the technology that you might use.
But I think this also leads to the idea of do this multiple times. The first time, I might not know what it is that I need to, what my priorities are. Is it on pacing? Is it on, my pacing? Is it on the way that I speak? Is it on my fidgeting? So I think at that point, starting off with this very private, sticking with wherever, back to the corner the first time, the second time.
Or even right up front. I mean, like, just put a table in front of you and lean your phone up. Like,
Or the laptop, right? They all have now the things on it. Having this facing me right up here, that's very small and, yes.
Is it a problem having your phone since your own private phone?
for what?
Student videotaping? I'm like, because that's really easy, right? But then it's like, it's my public phone. So can I videotape on my phone? Like, is that allowed?
Just as much as it would be on your laptop, right?
It's not a I mean,
Yeah.
Well, the laptop's like this, not my laptop though, it's my department's.
All right, but you have student papers in your backpack, which is yours, right? I mean, it's not.
Oh, I just thought that, right, I'm
If no one-
overthinking.
if-
Okay,
yeah.
okay, thank you.
it's
Sorry.
kind of like Facebook
Didn't mean that
Live
better.
or something,
Then it's a
like,
problem.
or like-
Okay,
You have a lot.
I mean, if no one has access to your phone, that's your sole possession.
Yeah.
I have no problem.
okay, thank you.
I mean,
That's
don't put it
easier.
on your like iCloud share, so
Yeah, no,
Aunt Sally can see it and all that good stuff.
Look what I did today.
I mean, and there might be a way that you might want to use a cloud-based place for storing it,
Sure.
but there are ways to
Yeah.
lock that
Secure
down
that.
beforehand. Because especially with iPhones, they're so restrictive on how much space you can have.
Mhm,
Like, people in the Android world have a little bit more like storage.
mhm.
Apple has really restricted iPhone storage. You might be locked into recording to YouTube straight. But you'll just need to make sure that like that it's everything's set up to be private before you hit record. And then you're not eating up all the storage space on your.
Right, so how many of you have ever used Facebook Live for that? It's very easy to use, and it might be very tempting to be like, I know how to use it, so I can use it. But if you don't hit the settings right, it could go off to, the whole world. And it's I would not trust myself to use that.
And the YouTube, if you have the YouTube app on any phone, you can record straight to YouTube, and it doesn't take up any space on your phone. But you just need to make sure that whatever account you're using is you just got it locked down. And I would say you all have YouTube accounts through the Google Suite agreement that the university has. You just, use your home Gmail for like your public, YouTubing, and like, just make sure you set up everything in your university one to just be locked down.
And so it's getting easier and easier to do this. And I think this gets back to Lindy's, why do it and how do I convince other people to do it? Because you can do it, and it's simple and easy, and it's only for you, at least for starters. And once you see yourself, then the light bulbs start going off like, oh my gosh, I need to work on stopping fidgeting or stopping moving around, or this is very distracting, or my slides make no sense. And then I think at that point, we can get to the next point of what are the things that I want to work on myself. Maybe I need help on this one particular thing, so I'm gonna ask a trusted colleague to look at it, peer look at it, or a group of other folks in the chemistry instructors who all have experience with the same classroom, the same teaching challenges that I might have. Kelvin, have other people in your department done this, and have you had conversations about that experience that you did?
I've not actually, no. It's been a private affair if they have.
Alright. But you did share this with it was with MTLE, I think, the first time, or one of the
Yeah,
early times you did that.
yeah. MTLE used the video of my class, and they did show it to a bunch of programs on campus. Maybe even you showed it. But
I
it
have
was,
not.
it was,
I
okay.
saw it once.
But it was a large class, and the expectation of anonymity was pretty strong, I think.
Yeah.
And the camera was in the back, so you couldn't see the students'
Right.
faces. You could see me.
Yeah, it was definitely high enough fidelity that I could see you moving around,
Yeah,
but you're only recognizable because you're the person standing.
yeah.
That was sort of,
A very large
that
class.
was sort of it. But in that self-assessment that you did with that, was there a checklist that you looked at that, or was there any prompt with that, or was it just you looked at it and you came to your own conclusions?
So I've done it for private reasons. I just wanted to see how my teaching goes. I think that particular clip that they selected it because it was showing a breakout activity. I tend to do breakout activities in a large class, and that's maybe unusual or difficult to accomplish when you have 150 students, and we wanted to see how that would play out. And it's actually a funny clip in that there's not much happening, except students are working in small groups, and I'm kind of going like a bee from class, from group to group, and chatting with them a little bit. What happened?
I want to just revisit like this Lindy example and other things that we've talked about. I mean, part of like setting up for like getting the one thing you want to record is having an objective. And so like Lindy has a very public objective. She wants to actually make an instructional asset for her team. That also affects the technology you use, because the truth is you are not going to get the outcome that you need by using phones. You're not going to be able to teach those instructors how to teach actively in the same way that you might set up a camera for your own self-assessment or for classroom management self-assessment that you are just evaluating by some kind of rubric. There, you have entered another realm of intentionality, and you do actually have, it's going to be an educational resource, or you need to make it so it's not one, so that it is a production. This might be a place where you just say, we're just from the very beginning, we're going to find the dozen students we need. They're all going to sign consents. We're going to do this in a way that the instructors can actually use this resource after the fact. So that's another tech consideration. Like the more eyes that are going to be on this, the more technology has to get involved. So that might be a way to put it.
Yeah. So thinking of like because it would be easy if I just used an iPad, because then I can just do my editing and I'm moving, pull out what I need to, that kind of thing. And it's quick. If I take that approach, would a microphone that, like a cordless microphone, they've got those that will talk with devices, right? Do you know?
Oh, sure, yeah.
Okay,
Mhm.
so do you think, again, because if I do this, it's gotta be very quick, because we only have so many classes left for the
Right.
semester,
Mhm.
and we're gonna be onboarding in January.
Yep.
So, so I'm thinking like doing something with a quick turnaround time, just to kind of get this going, but long-term, it'd be nicer to have more polished.
Well, I'm just saying, not even just polish, but just like that kind of thing.
More
So
quality.
when you know what the use case is at the
Yeah.
end, it affects your intentionality at the beginning.
Right.
So,
So do you think I would get the quality, is an iPad with a mic gonna help, or do I really need to be thinking like video camera setup type thing?
it just depends on exactly what you want to show.
Right.
Like, try it, and, I mean, we can talk about this, because
Yeah.
we've actually been in those classrooms too,
Right,
and we are actually doing a parallel project for math,
okay,
like for their onboarding. So
okay.
we're actually making exact videos for math, so that they know how to turn math to the calculus course into active learning when they're bringing on. So I did,
Right,
but that's a whole other like.
Right, yeah,
I think that we can go back to the psychological difficulty of having a camera in front of you.
Yeah.
And what effect does that have? How you've coached lots of people through being in front of the camera. Like, how long does it take before somebody is comfortable in front of the camera, right? How long did it take, Catalina, you to be like, all right, I've seen myself enough times, I'm no longer, you're still not there, you said, right? But
Yeah, my answer to that is you're never comfortable in front of the camera. Our job is to make it so you forget the camera's there. So that's our approach when we come in, is to make you forget that we're there, so that you will do your best.
And so I'm wondering if there, again, the idea of, even if you're not live recording, having a tripod in the room so
Right.
that you get used to it, and eventually you stop being like, every time that you see it and it starts to become more natural, like just another prop in the room.
I would say nerves really depend on the objective. If I was not nervous at all knowing that I was being recorded, just because I knew I was gonna be the only one watching this, although it's still really unpleasant to watch it, but if I knew that a bunch of teachers in training are going to be watching that, it would be a whole different experience.
Yeah.
And I did want to mention this one thing. I'm so glad you were thinking about microphones. In my scenario, without microphones, you cannot hear anything. So I was wearing one because it's such a large class and I have a small voice, so you could hear me, but none of the student questions were audible in the
Right.
slightest.
Right.
So I would think even for a medium-sized class, if the goal was to demonstrate interaction with the students, they might have to be wearing something.
Yeah.
Or you just practice that, a rack method, acknowledge the student question, repeat it, answer it, check with them, and then you capture the question. And that's modeling for future teachers, how to deal with
Right.
Yeah,
questions too.
very good.
Right.
But the audio thing is big. If we're, I mean, there is no on-camera mic or phone mic that's gonna pick up even in this room, it would be difficult.
Which is why we have the snowball in the center here.
So.
Are there any other questions here that we want to make sure that we hit in the last few minutes that we're here? Jennifer?
Well, I'd just like to touch on one thing I think we learned from the trial run in Sue's class, my class as a student, was we had an objective kind of going in. Like I think Sue said, I want to look at how I set expectations in my class. And then I think what I learned at least is that's too broad still, and you need to pick it apart even further. Like, am I looking at how much time I spend on expectations versus something else? Or am I looking at how, like, what's projected on the screen and how I interact with what I'm depicting and what I'm saying? Like, it has to be super, super detailed, is what I find from
Well,
that.
because what exactly happened was the laptop was there, a student sat down, and I moved around.
Right.
So there was like.
Exactly to your point of putting the laptop thing on the chalkboard. It
So
was
did-
exactly that. So sometimes you were there and
Right.
there were sections that we could look at and say,
Yeah.
this would be an interesting thing to cut out.
Yeah,
And there are other parts where you were inaudible and
that's
Yep.
what spike tape is for, so,
spike tape.
spike tape, that's the stuff you put on the stage in theater.
Stop.
Oh, the little marks.
Yeah,
So
say,
stand here.
Stand here,
Right.
no border.
Yeah.
So I mean, if you stepped out of bounds, you'd step on spikes.
You have this vision, don't you?
All right, so if nothing else, thank you all for coming and again, if you found this useful or at the bottom of this, if you think that we should have a topic on X, Y, or Z next semester, please write it down on the bottom. And that would be great. Thank you, Scott, for coming. Thank you, the rest of the contributors to come and share your experiences. I think it's a lot easier to have these conversations with people who've gone through this and have expertise than with just me.
We can say
With